Hi everyone, welcome back to Ap Koute. Have you ever looked at someone's behavior and thought you knew what was going on? Maybe you've seen them talking to themselves. Maybe you've heard someone being called fou. Maybe you've watched someone make decisions that didn't seem to make sense and assumed you understood their story. But what if there was so much more happening beneath the surface? Today, we are talking about a topic that many of us have seen, but very few of us truly understand. Growing up in Haiti, I remember seeing individuals with severe mental illness walking through the street. Many were isolated, many were ridiculed, and many of us simply accepted that this was just the way things were. It wasn't until I became a therapist that I began to understand what many of those individuals may have actually been experiencing. Today's conversation isn't about fear, it is not about judgment, it's about understanding. Because when we understand mental illness, we become better equipped to respond with compassion instead of criticism. Joining me today is Frantzie, a clinical social worker who works closely with individuals experiencing severe mental illness, including schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar disorder, and other conditions that often are misunderstood. Together, we are talking about what these illnesses really look like, why medication can be life changing for some individuals, how culture shapes the way we respond to mental illness, and how we as a community can become more supportive instead of more judgmental. I hope this conversation helps replace fear with understanding and remind us that beyond every diagnosis is a human being deserving of dignity, compassion, and care. Let's get started. So, before we dive into today's conversation, hi, Francie, how are
Hi,
you
good
doing?
morning.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Frantzie and I'm a social worker. I work with individuals living with severe mental illness, and I'm especially passionate about mental health awareness and our community.
Awesome, awesome. So, what drew you into working with individuals who face severe mental illness?
Well, I think it's all started with curiosity. I've always been someone who tries to understand people, especially people who are often misunderstood or labeled too quickly. You know, I became really curious about conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depression, and not just what the textbooks say, but what it actually feels like to live with them. Like, how does it affect someone's daily life, their relationships, or even the way they see themselves? And growing up in Haiti, I saw firsthand how mental illness was often sounded by stigma. A lot of people didn't really have access to accurate information, so there were a lot of misunderstandings. I remember hearing people making assumptions about someone who was struggling, and I would often find myself thinking, I wonder what the story really is. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, that question stayed with me. I think that curiosity is a big part of what eventually led me into social work. And now, one of the things that's really drives me, it's not only supporting people living with severe mental illness, but also helping them educate my community about really what mental illness is, because I really believe that when we replace fear with understanding and judgment with empathy, people feel more supported and they feel a lot less alone. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
this is something our community, or even every community, truly, really needs.
Yeah, beautiful. Yes, I like how you emphasize how the community also can be part of that. So, for those unfamiliar, what does schizophrenia or psychosis look like when someone is untreated, and how does medication change
Good
that?
question. Well, schizophrenia or psychosis can look very different from one person to another. Not everyone experiences the same symptoms. For example, one person might hear voices that no one else is here, while someone else might become very suspicious of thinking of people watching them, or believe that things that are just things that aren't true, while another person may have trouble organizing their thoughts to the point where it might be even hard for them to have a simple conversation with you, or even it really becomes difficult for them to even taking care of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when those symptoms aren't treated, they can affect almost every part of a person's life. They might struggle to keep a job, maintaining relationships, or even taking care of themselves. Now, one thing I would really like people to understand is that someone living with schizophrenia isn't crazy, and they are not automatically dangerous. They are living with
Yeah.
a serious mental health condition, just like someone with diabetes or high blood pressure. Like, they need medical care, right? So
Yeah.
somebody living with a severe mental illness also need treatment. They need support, compassion, but not judgment. The good news is medication can make a huge difference. He can reduce the voices, the paranoia, and the confused
Mm-hmm.
thinking. And once those symptoms start improving, people often have a much better chance of getting back to their daily lives.
Yeah. And daily life means like they can go to
Yes,
work, right?
they can go to work, have, better relationships with their loved one, and do their daily
Mm-hmm.
activities.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know in our culture we think everything is lost with these people, and nothing else can help them. When someone is experiencing hallucination, for example, how do you meet them without dismissing what they are going through, their reality, their experience?
Well, one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that arguing with someone who's experiencing psychosis usually doesn't help. What they see or hearing feels completely real to them. So telling them they're wrong usually just makes them feel misunderstood. So instead, I would try to lead with empathy and curiosity. I want to understand what they're experiencing, and even more importantly, how it's making them feel. You know, every person's experience is different. And that's one of the things I appreciate most about my work. Sometimes I hear a story and I think, wow, I never would have looked at the world that way. So those conversations remind me that every person has a story, and it's my job to listen before I judge.
Yeah.
And honestly, in our Haitian community, people are sometimes labeled Moun Fou, like you said earlier, or crazy, did way too quickly. When the truth is, it's usually much more complicated than that. Those people, they're dealing with serious mental condition, not just a character flaw. But we sitting down a lot of time just label them and judge them. So I always encourage families to listen first. You don't have to agree with what your loved one is experiencing, but you can recognize that their fear, confusion, or distress is real to them. And the thing is, when people feel heard and respected, they're often much more open to accepting help. And at the end of the day,
Yeah.
what do we know? What do we really need? The goal is to support the person, not just label them or judge them, right? So
Yeah,
we all have one
definitely.
goal.
Yeah, and you said something beautiful, which I think that's what I appreciate more about what we do, the work that we do. It's like you said, helping them lower these barriers by being compassionate and listening to them and opening the door. But also, there's always a deeper story when we do that. I like our ability, right? I know people like to talk about empathy a lot, but, or I have empathy and things like that. But I think for us, it's more than just on the surface. It's a skill that we've learned to just take somebody for, or take a situation for what we see, and then to help that person become very comfortable or creating that safe
Yes.
space for them to be able to say, okay, I can be vulnerable or I can trust that person, right? And because at the end of the day, if they don't feel trustworthy, especially these people with severe mental illness, they become more
Yes.
paranoid, right? And they've been through a lot with people not understanding them, and they're navigating the reality in their head and the reality of the outside world, and it's totally different when they are having a
Yes.
crisis, right? For us to come in and be able to do that and then to understand the whole story,
They
it's
are already
beautiful.
going through so much. All they need now is a little more
Yeah.
compassion and less judgment.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. In Haiti, individuals with severe mental illness are often stigmatized, right, and
Yes.
isolated. How cultural awareness shift how we respond?
Well, I think cultural awareness really starts with learning and understanding. The more we learn about mental illness, the less likely we are to label people or push them away. When they're actually struggling and need support, be there for them, not pushing them away.
Yeah.
And also, I want to say something that's really important. In a lot of communities, including our community, our Haitians community, faith and mental health treatment don't have to be in competition. They can actually work
Yes.
together.
Yeah.
So yes, we can pray, we can have faith in God, and at the same time, we can also seek help. We can also see professionals and get the treatment that we need. One doesn't
Yes.
cancel the other. Sometimes people say, we have Jesus, so we don't need a therapist. You probably heard that
Yeah.
before, right?
All the time.
But
Yes.
me, I see it a little differently. I think it can be both. Prayer can bring comfort, strength,
Yes.
and hope. And treatment
Yes.
can bring tools, structure, and healing.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, we all want the same outcome. We want people to be well. We want people to be able to live full lives, right? So for
Yes.
me, cultural awareness is really about shifting that mindset from judgment to understanding and from isolation to support. Because when we
Yeah.
do that, we give people a real chance to heal and we make them comfortable to ask for help.
Yes. Yes, that part. That's a big misunderstanding. And I don't think it's just like you said from the beginning, it's not just from our community. For a lot of community where mixing mental health and faith is seen as bad. Is seen as and I think the the person that suffers more is the person dealing with the mental illness, because the message being sent is like you feel this way or you're not getting better because you're not praying enough, right?
Yes.
When in reality the person
Yes.
needs support in order to understand, and like you said, use tools, because that's what we do in therapy. We identify tools to help in the healing
Yes.
process, and people cannot identify it on their own. They need support. And yes, like you said, praying is actually something we encourage clients to do all the time, because like you said, if something that they're bringing in is already something that is a strength for them, it's part of their life, and you want them to continue doing that and adding what they didn't have to it,
Yep.
right? And make beautiful um uh, result,
Yeah.
beautiful story. We have this fear or these messages, right, that somehow we can't miss
Or we,
them.
we, we can do both. You don't have to cancel one for the other one.
Yeah, definitely. So talking about messages, right? How harmful messages like calling someone Moun Fou, like they are crazy, can actually worsen outcomes. And what would be a more supportive alternative?
Well, we all know words really do matter. When we call someone fool or crazy, it doesn't just stay as a word, it can really stick with the person, right? He can make them
Yes.
feel ashamed, isolated, and honestly, less likely to reach out for help. So instead of labeling someone, a more supportive way is to focus on what they're actually going through. So, for example, we can say, he is struggling right now, or she is dealing with a mental health condition, but not quickly label them as moonful or crazy. And the thing is, we already understand this in other areas of health, right? We don't define someone by their illness, right? We say
Yeah.
someone has diabetes. We don't say that he is diabetes. Or we say they have high blood pressure. We don't say that she is high blood pressure. Or we
Yeah.
say they have asthma, or we can go on and on,
Yeah.
right? So mental health should be no different. It's something a person is going through at the moment. It's not who they are.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the more we use compassionate language and try to understand instead of labeled, the more likely people are to feel safe enough to come to us to get help. And honestly, that small shift in how we speak can make a really big difference. And maybe it sounds like a little things, but it can make a
Yeah.
really big difference if we just change the way we talk to people.
Yeah. Because people always remember how we make them
Yes.
feel, right? And compassionate words and being welcoming will make them feel
Yes.
positively. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. We know that behaviors, thoughts, and emotions are intertwined. Um, how do we help communities, our people, to see beyond behaviors when it comes to mental health?
I think one of the biggest challenges is that we tend to focus only on what we can see. So we see someone's behavior, but we don't always pause and ask, okay, what's actually going on underneath that? Too often, people start at the behavior. They see someone isolating themselves, talking to themselves, or acting differently, and that's where the story ends for them, right? And you said that earlier during the introductions, right? So we were thinking alike.
Yes, exactly.
But the thing is, behavior is only one part of the picture. Underneath that behavior, there could be depression, trauma, anxiety, psychosis, or another mental health conditions that the person is struggling with. You know, as a social worker, one thing I've really learned is that behavior is often communications. It's like a check engine light, right? It doesn't tell you exactly what's wrong, but it lets you know some things needs attention. So the more we can help our communities to slow down and look beyond what's visible, the more likely we are to respond with compassion instead of judgment. And at the end of the day, that shift can really change how people are treated and whether they get help they need or not.
I really like that picture you gave. Just like a car, right? The light is on. It doesn't tell you right away what's happening, but you know you gotta go to a mechanic, and the mechanic will say, "Okay, this is
Give you
why
a
it's on."
diagnosis.
Exactly. Exactly. So it is so true. It's the same thing. Yeah. That was a good one. I like that one. Yeah. So now what about when somebody is experiencing or is actually when they have a family member, right, that needs care, that needs psychiatric care, and especially in a culture like ours where it is stigmatized. How does that family member or that friend can go about helping, right, a loved one?
Well, I think the first step is really how you approach the person. It helps to come from a place of compassion, not judgment. You can see that I use a lot of compassion and not no judgment. So this is very
Yes.
important because
Yeah.
honestly, it can be tempting to label, criticize, or just tell someone, especially in our culture, right? Just tell that person, snap out of it. It's not real. You know, it's easy to say those things. But that usually pushes them away instead of helping them open up. So instead, I always encourage families to start a real conversation. Let your loved one know your concern, and more importantly, let them know you there for them. You know, sometimes just feeling heard can already take a lot of weight off someone's shoulders, right? And the thing is, in communities where mental illness is still stigmatized, like our Haitian community, it can be really hard for people to ask for help. So it's important to remind people that seeking psychiatric care, it's no different than seeking care for any other health condition. And let me say this clearly, getting help is not weakness, it's actually a sign of strength. So let's people remember that. And again, let's go back with the faith. Faith and professional help don't have to be either or. You can pray
Yes.
for your family, support them spiritually, and still encourage them to talk to a mental health professional. Because
True.
again, at the end of the day, the goal is the same. We just want
Yes.
them to get the care and support that they need, and we want them to live healthier and have a
Mm-hmm.
stable life.
Yes. Yes. Very important for them to have a
Yes.
stable life.
And we have the same outcome.
Yeah, that is true. Yes. Well, I really hope, like you said, compassion is something that people get out of this. If anything, out of this episode is how important compassion is. So, if you could tell our community one thing about severe mental illness, what would it be?
That is really an important question. Well, if I could tell the community just one thing, it will be this: severe mental illness, it's not a character flaw, and it's
Mm-hmm.
nothing to be ashamed of. You
Mm-hmm.
know, conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depression, they are health
Mm-hmm.
conditions, just like diabetes or high blood pressure. They affect how a person thinks, feels,
Mm-hmm.
and experiences the world, but they don't
Mm-hmm.
define who that person is. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, I also want people to remember that with the right support, treatment, and understanding, a lot of people can do and improve. And many are able to live stable, meaningful lives. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of labeling someone or isolating them, I really
Mm-hmm.
encourage us to lean into compassion. Take the
Yes.
time to listen, to support, and to gently guide people toward help. Because the thing is that one little shift from judgment to understanding can
Mm-hmm.
completely change someone's life. And at the end of the day, we have one goal: for our people to get better and to live a meaningful life. So if we do that,
Yes.
it can really change our community.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Beautiful. Y- It one thing I would add to everything beautiful you just said, everything important and necessary that you just said. It's also that person to not feel shame if they know someone dealing with mental illness too, or severe mental illness, because sometimes you don't want somebody else to say, oh, your mom is crazy, or your dad, and for yourself too, you might want to hide it and not help this family member get support because you don't want to be seen, you feel ashamed. And there is no shame into helping and supporting others. So thank you, Frantzie. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today, your experience. I truly appreciate the work that you do, trust me, and your willingness to help our community better understand severe mental illness. And to everyone listening, I hope today's conversation remind you that mental illness isn't something to fear or to judge. It's something we can learn about, understand, and respond to with greater compassion. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast and share it with someone who may benefit from hearing this conversation. The more we learn, the more we can help reduce stigma in our families and community. If you are looking for a space to continue these conversations and reflect on our own healing journey, on your own healing journey, I would love to invite you to join Lakai Within, my monthly virtual gathering for Haitian women. Our next gathering will take place on August 11th. Together, we slow down, reflect, connect, and create space for healing in community. And if you're not quite ready for the virtual gathering, you are also welcome to join the free Lakai Within community where I share reflections, journal prompt, wellness tools, and updates throughout the month. You'll find both links in the show notes. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for having me.